I called up my dad and I was like, hey, Dad, I know what I want to do here. And I think I'm going to open up a cocktail bar. The first question he asked was, is your liver going to be okay, honey? In uni, I was in marketing. So it was all white people. I was brilliant in math. I went home. I brought home a 92 on my test. And I'm like, hey, Mom, Dad, look, I passed as an Asian now.
What is it about Vietnam that keeps you here? What do you like about it the most?
I love the vibrancy and almost how chaotic it is. But you still get the best of both worlds. You can always find something to do depending on your mood.
Welcome to a Vietnam podcast with me, your host, Niall Mackay. I first came to Vietnam in 2015 for a vacation, was here for 2 weeks, went back home and could not wait to come back. Came back a year later for just 6 weeks and basically never left. In 2019, I started this podcast, a Vietnam podcast, because I was bored one day and just for a bit of fun because I love podcasts. Little did I know that 5.5 years later, I would still be in Saigon. This would be an award-winning podcast. We recently won the best interview podcast in all of Asia, which is absolutely incredible. And I now run 7 Million Bikes Podcast, where we make podcasts for other people. So all of that is just absolutely mind-blowing, to be perfectly honest. Now, my guest today, I am really excited to share with you. So I first messaged her in 2021, asking to be on this podcast, and she said no. She is Vietnamese Canadian. She runs 2 bars. She owns 2 of my favorite cocktail bars here in Saigon, 86 Proof, which a lot of you may know, which we are here right now, and a newer one, Mammy Cocktails as well. And despite owning 2 cocktail bars, she cannot make a cocktail herself. So I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Rochelle Nguyen.
Thanks for having me. But then I would like to say that my no wasn't that blunt, okay? It was a very nice Canadian no.
Well, actually, let's hear the text that I sent. So we looked it up earlier. So it was February, was it you said, 2021?
Yeah, February 2021. You were very nice about it. Let's see.
And you're not the only person that said no, so don't worry.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
But not many.
Yeah, here's a text right here.
Oh, it's bigger than I thought. Oh, it's quite
Yeah,
long.
it was very long. Very long.
What did I say?
You
I don't even remember. I just remember you said no.
You said, hey, Rochelle, we've never met before, but you've helped online finding bar stools for my balcony, smiley face. I'm a big fan of 86 Proof. And then you just pitched yourself and asked me to come on.
And what did you say?
I said no.
But how did you say it?
I said, thanks for reaching out. Sorry for such a slow reply. I think I might have seen a couple of your stand-up shows with JK back then. Podcast looks great, but I'm not really that comfortable in front of a mic or camera. Sorry. Thanks again.
So what changed? Why are you on now then?
I mean, you've been asking. Misha's been asking. Might as well now. I did the short interview at the Dot magazine. That was 3 minutes. This one should be better. We'll see.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. So as I mentioned all those years ago, 86 Proof has been one of my favorites. It still is. We're here right now. One of my favorite things is sitting on the balcony right there and just watching people go by.
Yeah.
It's a rare thing that you sit here in Tao Dien and don't see somebody go by that you know, which is always quite fun. And just before we started, I took off my glasses and it was quite funny. The last time I was here, somebody went by that I knew and I hadn't seen for a while and I waved and they looked at me and they were like I could see them and who the fuck is that? And they actually came all the way in, which was really nice. And it wasn't until she got really close to me. She's like, oh, Neil, I didn't recognize you without your glasses on. I was like, yeah, sorry, I forget. And somebody else said the other day, I think I do look quite different.
It's like a Superman thing.
Yeah.
Completely different disguise.
Well, I saw this meme recently of Zooey Deschanel without bangs or glasses. And it said, I now understand why people got Clark Kent and Superman, how they didn't know that was 2 different people, because to me, that's not Zooey Deschanel.
Yes, you're Superman now, huh?
I'll take that. I'll take that.
But I granted, if you told me that my voice was going to sound like this, or like in audio, I would have said yes a long time ago.
You're going to be wanting to do this all the time.
Yeah, I like the sound of my own voice now.
It's amazing, right? I know. I'm a very strange person. I do like the sound of my own voice. But I think because I've heard it so much, I'm used to it.
Have you done the whole ASMR whispering thing?
No, but I think
I think it worked.
Yeah.
Let's just do the whole episode and whisper.
In ASMR, that's pretty good. No, so tell me why somebody who doesn't make cocktails opened 1 cocktail bar and then opened 2.
Well, I would say back then, like this would have been 5 years ago. Back then on Suong Toi, there wasn't really any cocktail bars. We had Aperitivo, which was kind of like the gin spot. We had the original Pasteur that was that tiny little shop front, and then beer craft. That's it. So we didn't really have any cocktail bars outside of having like Buddha Bar
That's not a
and like
cocktail bar.
D2 Sports Pub. So that were the institutions of Tao Dien. So at that point, that's when I met Jason. He had the Poke Shop. He was opening that up. And we decided, he was like, hey, Rochelle, you've always had like an entrepreneurial spirit. You've always wanted to do something. Why don't you open up a cocktail bar instead of taking your master's? So at that, I was like, hey, that's a good idea. So then a location opened right up next to Onopoki. So Onopoki was 94 Song Tui, and the original 86 proof was at 98. So then I reached out to the landlord, did all the numbers, and I called up my dad. And I was like, hey, Dad, so I think I know what I want to do here. Are you okay with like giving up my plans of doing my master's next year? And I think I'm going to open up a cocktail bar. The first question he asked was, is your liver going to be okay?
That's a great question. That's not what I was expecting at all.
That was his main concern, not about if the business was going to be successful, my experience, or if I had any business opening up a cocktail bar, but is your liver going to be okay, honey?
And how's your liver doing?
It's because surprisingly, I drank a lot before I opened up a bar.
Yeah.
Once I opened up 86 proof, I barely drank. Yeah, you ask the staff, they're like, she drinks maybe once a month outside of tasting their cocktails.
Wow. That makes sense though, because there's that thing for drug dealers, right? Like you don't do your own stash, right? Like I've heard this from movies. Not that I'm a drug dealer at all. I've never dealt drugs. I'm not even kidding. I've never dealt drugs, but I've heard that's true, right? So it makes sense as a bar owner that if you're just getting smashed all the time in your own bar, that's not a good look and probably not good for your profit margins either.
I imagine, yeah. But I think it's just easier in the sense that back then drinking was like relaxing. Now, if I want to drink, I'll be away. Or now because I know alcohol a lot more, I'm a little bit of a bougie bitch. It's no longer just looking for the cheapest shit anymore, which was high school days, university days. We drank early in my high school. Too early.
Well, I think about, when I used to drink, a cocktail would be like a vodka Coke.
Right? Yeah,
for
exactly.
a pound on a student night.
Yeah.
And now,
A Long Island was fancy.
yeah, right. No,
like,
I'm not
oh.
allowed to drink Long Island's. Adri doesn't let me.
I mean, Long Island's 5 different types of spirits. That's fancy.
With a dash of Coke.
Exactly.
Who came up with that? Why is that a thing?
I'm assuming Long Islanders?
You think
Actually,
so?
I actually don't know the history.
Let's both look it up and we'll find out. Yeah. So tell me a bit about your background growing up in Canada.
So my parents were also similar to a lot of Vietnamese people here. They were immigrants. They came over right after the 80s on a boat when they were teenagers. So my parents were actually high school sweethearts, and they broke up because they knew that they were going to be going abroad and they didn't know what country they'd end up in. And then somehow magically they ended up on the same boat, unplanned. My dad was on the second floor, my mom was on the first floor. And after the second night of just pitch black ocean, they heard each other's voices. So even when I hear this story, it just sounds like straight out of a movie or a rom-com, but not romantic comedy because this is depressing. Yeah, war is not happy.
Yeah, that's incredible though.
Yeah.
So when you say they were on a boat, because I've interviewed lots of people whose parents were Vietnamese boat people, was it like a cruise liner or they were on like a boat?
It's just a random boat. So you had to escape in the middle of the night usually. So back then they would kind of pay someone in just gold to hide them out and sneak them onto a boat so that way they could leave Vietnam. And usually they'd either end up in the Philippines or Malaysia. So it usually be between 2 to 3 nights on the boat, pure black, because you can't turn on any lights or else pirates would get you or if the government would get you too. Yeah. So then they made it to Malaysia and they were there for about 6 months before Canada took them. Yeah, so that's how they ended up in Canada. And they made me and my sister about 10, 15 years later.
So do they tell you much about what life was like before they left?
They do, but then not as many stories as I would like. I can only get stories from them when they're with their families and they're kind of reminiscing and over a couple drinks. Other than that, I don't think they like talking about it much because I think they saw quite a lot of things that they would rather just bury.
What do you know?
Oh, I know there were a lot of people dying, like unfortunately, and then a lot of starvation. I mean, my mom, when she left Vietnam, she would have been about 140 pounds, and she's 5'3", so she's a small woman, but she had meat on her bones. And then by the time she got to Canada, she was 90 pounds.
Sorry, I'm trying to do the maths in kilograms at the same time. So it's from about 70
so she
kilos
lost
to
about 25 kilos in the
Wow.
span of 6 months. just from like the stress, the anxiousness, and just from the lack of food as well. Yeah.
And do you know where they got onto a boat or how they got onto a boat?
So usually I know from what they told me, once you get there, there would be kind of a refugee camp that they take you in. And then you just kind of all the Vietnamese people would just kind of band together and support each other, and they would help each other out. And then you have to line up at an office to just basically get your name into a country. So they'll look whether or not like your age, your family, if you have any health conditions, and then countries will basically be like they'll offer, or not really a bid, but they can say like, hey, you can come here. So for example, my mom had 12 siblings. So yeah, grandma was busy.
Oh, yeah. I always think like do the math, 9 times 12, that's 107 months pregnant, right?
Yeah.
107 months.
It's pretty much you pop out
That's
one
10
baby
years,
and
11
then
years.
grandpa's frisky, you put in another one.
Gee, 12 children.
Yeah. So with my parents, I think 8 of them were able to leave Vietnam from my mom's side. So some of them ended up in Germany, in France, Australia, the US, just whichever country would take you at that point. You weren't picky, just whatever country would open your doors, you'd be like, okay. So my parents were either deciding between Germany and Canada, and Germany looked colder in December at that point.
That's what it came down to.
Yes.
Yeah. So what did they do once they got to Canada?
So at that point, churches took them in, because I know at that point, Canada would match 1-to-1 donations. So if the church would give an X amount, the government would give back as well. So that's what my parents basically changed their name so they could get free meals in churches.
Change the names? Like, what do you mean?
So their names are Hung and Van,
Yeah.
which is quite easy to say even if you say it in English, but
Yep.
they changed it to Tom and Ann just to basically match themselves with the church a little bit more, because my parents would do anything for a free meal or
Well,
for a discount.
I mean, I would do anything for a free
Yeah.
meal as well.
So then they were settled in Calgary at first. Yeah.
And how do you know how they dealt with the weather? Because I'm assuming all I know from
Yeah.
Calgary is I think Cool Runnings was set there, right? There was the Winter Olympics
it's
there,
cold.
so it must be cold.
It's cold.
So how do they deal with that? Do
Oh,
you
they-
know? Or
I mean, it was so new to them, and at that point they were 18 years old.
wow.
So it was just an adventure. And that's why they've pretty much done everything at that age. They just want to experience life. They would, any job they could take. So it's usually at that point, I know a lot of people who came over from the boat, they would either work in like a kitchen, washing dishes, or a lot of airport jobs.
So what did they do for work once they got to Canada?
Let's see. I think my dad worked in the airport for a little bit. My mom got a job dishwashing, and then they had to go to school at the same time. I don't remember if it was a 3 or a 6 month program, but I just remember my dad saying that someone else in the school, they would help him with the English and he would help them with the math. So as true stereotypes, Asians and the math.
There are so many stereotypes, but they're generally quite true, aren't they?
Yeah.
How's your maths?
I mean, not as good as compared to the standard Asian. So in high school, I went with an all Asian school, like 90% Asian. So my math was shitty compared to them. But then in uni, I was in marketing. So it was all white people. I was brilliant in math. I'm like, I went home, I brought home a 92 on my test. And I'm like, hey, mom, dad, look, I passed as an Asian now.
So somebody told me that years ago. I remember they were like, I'm good at maths, but bad for an Asian.
Yeah.
It's which means you're better than most people, right? Still.
Exactly.
So what did you study then in you went to university, and
Yeah.
what did you do?
First year, I studied engineering because
You're
both my,
definitely the only female then in your class, and I'm going to
Yeah.
guess the only Asian female.
pretty much, yeah. Because my sister is an electrical engineer by trade, and also my dad was a computer engineer. So I was just like, I didn't know what to do after high school. Everyone told me that engineering was not for me, but I was like, that's the only option. So that's what I signed up for. Bad idea. One semester, and I was like, yeah, this was
That was it, just
Yeah.
one semester.
one semester. And then I had to redo all of my credits so that way I could get into marketing or business. So that was a little bit of an adjustment. And then I finished marketing communications and my BA. And then I started working in advertising agencies. Yeah.
Is Canada similar to the US? Because I know in the UK, like when I went to university, we apply for a specific course. Like I applied to physiotherapy, I applied to sports science. But in the US, you apply to like a school, which I think is so different to where I'm from. What's it like in Canada?
In Canada, so every university will have a different specialization. So, like, for example, if you go to Toronto, I think their sciences are really good. And then every year there's a different ranking on if you would go to Montreal for McGill, UT, or UBC, where I'm from. So, depending on what you want to be, you would apply for that school and then have backup plans.
So when you changed your degree, you don't change school, right? You just change the program at the school.
My school didn't really have a good marketing
Oh, okay.
program. So then that's why I changed schools to something that was more of accelerated. So then rather than doing 4 years, I did it in 2 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So then that was a full-time job. Like, it was, I think, 12 courses a semester at BCIT. Yeah.
One of the things I love about Canadian universities, or Canada in general, the difference between Canada and America is that you can drink at 18 in Canada, like most normal countries. And I had friends, I used to live in Rhode Island, so in the Northeast, and they would go up to like McGill, or they would go over the border because they were like 18, 19, just to go party and drink in Canada. It's just so weird to think that you would never do the reverse, right? If you were 18, 19, you wouldn't be like, let's go party in America. Oh, wait, no, we can't drink in America.
Yeah. I mean, 18, but then in my school, I started drinking early. So when I look at my nieces and nephews now, I'm like, ooh, please do not be me. I started drinking at grade 8, so right when I turned 14.
Shit, that's early.
And that was not just like a casual beer with the family or a casual wine. That was getting drunk on Jägermeister and vodka to the point where Jägermeister's not allowed in 86 proof anymore.
I don't think Jägermeister
I
should be
smell
allowed
it
in
and I'm
any
like,
bar.
"Oh, nope.
Is that your drink of, I was going to say not of choice. What's the opposite of your drink of choice would be Jägermeister?
I think, well, when in high school, it would be a lot of Smirnoff ices. And then there was something called a sourpuss. It was like it was like super sour. You would mix it with vodka. And it's basically like a girly shot that's easy to drink but gets you plastered because there's so much sugar in it. So that was high school.
But what drink would you never touch? Like, it was sourpuss, but you wouldn't even get that here, right?
No,
What
I
would
haven't
be a
seen that in
drink
a long
that you would
time.
never go near because you got so drunk on it?
Like now?
Yeah.
Jägermeister.
Yeah.
It's just the burp the next day. Ooh, you can still taste it.
Mine's vodka orange juice.
Okay,
I
yeah.
wouldn't.
Screwdrivers.
Nobody really should be drinking vodka orange juice. But even if it ever came up, I was, I think, 17.
Yeah.
And have you ever played the drinking game to Roxanne?
No.
Yeah, don't ever do it. You think about the song Roxanne by the Police.
Yeah.
And then the chorus just goes, Roxanne, Roxanne. And I can't remember it. He just says Roxanne like about 30 times back to back. And the game is you have to take a drink every time he says Roxanne. Yeah, I know, right? So I was like 17, didn't really know like how to handle my drink. I was hanging out with the older boys before a football game. And I'm like, yeah, I can drink. And drinking along to this Roxanne, well, drinking other stuff as well, and just ended up so absolutely
What's the point of drinking to Roxanne? You might as well just drink. That's drinking
I
for
know.
like the entire song.
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah.
the stupidest drinking game I've ever heard. But again, you're like 17. You're like, yeah, I'll do it. It'll be fun. I don't think I realized though until it started, because it kind of like slowly builds, and then it gets to the point where you're just saying it constantly and you're just knocking them back.
Yeah.
But how did you end up drinking at 14? Like, is it easy to get alcohol in
It was
Canada?
easy because we always just had older siblings that would be okay, and then house parties. My parents were okay with me drinking at 16. They didn't know about 14 until recently. But at 16, they were like, we would rather you spend your money on alcohol at home than go out and like sneak and buy fake ID. So then my house became the resident house party in high school. So I remember graduation, grade 12. I thought it was going to be like, oh, cute little like 30 people after party at my house. 120 people. At that point, I looked around and I was like, okay, I'm grabbing the vodka bottle. I'm going this way, guys. I'm done.
You had 120 people at your house?
Yeah.
When you were 16?
This was 18 for high school.
Oh, right. And
Yeah.
your parents were okay with that?
Yes, they were okay with it. I remember they woke up at like 4 a.m. And at this point, there was one of my friends. He was just passed out in front of their room, shirt off. He was done for the night. Like he was topless, like because he threw up on himself. And then my dad looked at him, giggled, kicked him. You're alive. Then went to go to the washroom and went back to sleep.
If I brought like 2 friends back to my house drunk, my mom would lose her shit, basically.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like my parents in their 20s and 30s, I think they really like partied hard.
Yeah.
So they're okay with me now.
It's quite scary what you said there, when you look at your cousins or whatnot and you think like, what are they getting up to? I mean, even now I see sometimes like kids walking about. They're not kids, they're like 16, and you're like, yeah, I mean, I was doing way worse things probably. than what these little kids are doing, just walking about the street. And you're like, look at them. And you're like, no.
Yeah. So my cousins, they have teenagers now, teenage boys. And then she always gets like, oh, Rochelle, like you're kind of like their cool auntie. So can you just like find out? Like, what if like just find out? So I'm like, okay.
And what did you find out?
Um, I told her, I'm like, you got to check his TikTok. He's looking at weird stuff, questionable stuff.
So I don't use TikTok, so you can see what other people are looking at. And so you were looking at his TikTok.
He showed it to me.
Oh, he showed it to you?
He showed it to me. Yeah.
And you're like, gotta check this out. So you've got an older sister. How much older is she?
She's 5 years older, so she would be 36, 37.
And do you look alike?
Kind of. I look like my dad. She looks like mom.
My question is, were you able to use her ID when you were underage and she was old enough?
No.
No, you don't look that similar?
No.
Because that would have been... Because when you've got an older sibling, that's a good way. And at least you could buy you alcohol. So I was the oldest one, so I wasn't able to get someone. We always had to use somebody's older brother. Like one person had an older brother, and it's like, can you ask him to buy
honestly, it was my
alcohol?
dad who bought us alcohol.
No way.
Yeah.
The best story that I've got about buying alcohol is one time I hid it somewhere before a concert. My friend and I, Martin, were going to go to this concert, get drunk, and it got stolen somehow or got taken. I think I hid it in a school, and I think the janitor must have found it. It's like a Sunday morning I hid it because we were going to the concert that night. Anyway, long story short, the alcohol went missing. So we went to the local like bottle shop next to the bus stop they were going to get. And, someone like, you ask. And we're going to ask somebody. I don't know if you do this in Canada. It was a thing in Glasgow, in my suburb anyway. You'll ask someone.
Like you stand in the front.
Pretty much. And you're like, can you go buy me some booze? And I can't ever remember. I think it definitely worked. Sometimes you'd maybe find the right person and they'd be like, yeah, sure, what do you want? Like maybe cigarettes. I never smoked cigarettes, but maybe it worked more for cigarettes. But anyway, I walked up to this woman. Can't remember how old she was. Not that old. And I was like, excuse me, can you buy me a drink? Because that's how we kind of call it in Scotland, a drink, right? She's like, yeah, no worries, son. What do you want? And I was like, a jackpot, yeah, beauty. I was like, can you get us 2 bottles of White Lightning? White Lightning's like the cheap cider. She's like, White Lightning? I thought you meant a soft drink. I was going to buy you a Coke or something. I was like, oh, no, sorry, missus. And but what the fuck? Why would I be asking you to go into the shop and buy me a Coke? I could go in and do that myself. So we went from like, yes, she's going to buy it to like, oh, no, she's not. So we ended up going to the concert sober.
That's so sad.
I know, right? But I still think back to that.
Yeah.
Like,
I always looked a little bit older when I was growing up in Vancouver. So every time I went to like walk past a liquor store or I went with my dad, there'd always be teenagers being like, hey, can you like buy us something? I'm like, I'm your age, man. I can't. Sorry.
Yeah, so I always looked younger, like way younger. So I had never had any chance. And even, I remember I went to Australia recently to see my sister and they're really strict on carding you. And it's like, you got to be 25 or 30 or something like that. And I didn't get ID'd once. And I was so offended. No, not nice. I was so offended. I was like, what do you mean you're not ID me? Okay, I'm 42 years old, but still, God damn it, I want to get ID'd. And every time I just bought alcohol, they were just like, yep. And I saw something come up recently, a similar thing somebody posted about being offended, that they showed their ID and they immediately just glanced at it and handed them back. And they're like, how did you know so quickly? It's like, I saw your birthday. It was started at 19. I was like, fuck, see, we are in 2024 now. Like, if you just look at someone's ID and its date of birth starts 19.
Yeah, because 2000 now, it's 25 years old, right?
Stop it, right? Stop it. So what made you come to Vietnam in the first place 7.5 years ago?
So I quit my advertising job because I was a little bit bored of just a desk job. Didn't really like working for like RFPs, writing proposals for the government. So then my parents were going to Vietnam for a vacation to visit grandma. And my dad said, hey, why don't you come with us? Free trip. So I was like, yeah, okay, why not? I haven't gone traveling with my parents in a while. Let's do that. And so we went to Vietnam for 2 months. At the end of the 2 months, I said, hey, Dad, do you mind if I stay here for a bit? I kind of want to see if I like it and they'll figure it out. And his only rule was don't be a backpacker.
Yeah, that's a good rule.
He just said you have to make money somehow, whether you go get a job or you work online, you just have to make steady income. And that was his only requirement. And I had an uncle here who also, he was Vietnamese, but he also left on a boat to Canada. But he was the first one who came back to Vietnam once Vietnam opened up their borders again. So he came here and he kind of pretty much acclimated me into being able to live in Saigon, getting the best of both worlds, like the Western comforts, but also like the vibrancy of Saigon too. So I would say it's because of my uncle that I'm still here.
So your family are from Saigon?
Bien Hoa, so like 40
A
minutes.
little bit, yeah.
Basically like
Yeah.
Saigon.
So had you come back like many times before, or that trip was your first time here?
I came a lot as a kid. So my parents were lucky enough to come back here pretty much every summer in elementary school. So it would be 2 to 3 months of summertime. So June, July, August in Bien Hoa in the countryside. No Wi-Fi at that time. No, barely any TV. We were still burning DVD discs. And our entertainment was we could go pick out little baby ducklings and chicks from the market, and that's your pet for the summer.
I thought you were going to say that's your food for the summer.
I mean, they did eat my ducks. So.
So that's interesting though, because I know from the many conversations I've had that there are some parents when they left Vietnam, they never came back. And when their children then wanted to come back, they were like very fearful for them because of they'd fled the country essentially. So your parents are actually quite different. So what made them come back quite often? They had no qualms about themselves coming back here?
My parents were always a little bit more risk takers. They're still okay with it. And because that we had my Uncle Wing here, so he's lived here for the last 30 years after the war, and he's doing well for himself. He loves it. He used to work at the Park Hyatt back in Calgary too. And then when he moved here, he just loved it. And then he was the one who was able to convince everybody that, hey, Rochelle staying here isn't a crazy thing. She can be fine. So I think it's because he just kind of convinced and made everyone a little bit less worried. My dad has always been like, go do it. If you fail, then too bad. Whereas my mom is a little bit more worried. She'll always be the natural worrier.
And so when you made the decision to stay here, what did you do first of all then? Not being
I taught at ILA.
Right, that's right. That's where we both taught there, but
Yeah.
big company, right? Different. We never crossed paths while we were both there.
No,
yeah.
so I did because you have to take that like 1 month, not the CELTA, but at that point there was like the TESOL or the TEFL. So I did that back in Govap when I came here for 1 month. And then I got a job at ILA. But the best part about ILA is when I applied for Rochelle Nguyen as my name, I could never get an interview. So I had to change my name to Rochelle NG. So they would assume that I was Chinese versus Vietnamese.
This was for ILA?
This was for ILA.
Wow. So for anyone who doesn't know what ILA is, ILA Vietnam is one of the biggest English language schools here in Saigon. I used to work there as well in total for like most of the time I've been here. I only left last year, but I was part-time for the last few years. And it's a reputable school and it's really good. But that's interesting to hear. So again, for people who don't know, there is, and you can correct me or explain it, there's a little bit of racism here towards Vietnamese people, from Vietnamese people, because they want their children to be taught by foreigners. They want the children. I mean, I see a lot of, you can tell me more because I'm obviously a white person, so I don't see it as much. So I know when I first started at ILA, there were lots of people like an American Vietnamese and he had his name on the door. But I know there was some parents questioned that. They were like, why is there a Vietnamese person teaching my children? And the manager was like, no, he is American. His parents are Vietnamese. He has a Vietnamese name. And I always thought that ILA was pretty good like that because I know they hired lots of different people from all over the world, people of color, like our friend JK. And so, but you found in the beginning they didn't want to hire you because of your last name?
Yeah, that's what I noticed. And then I just winged it. I was like, do not skirt. I'll just change my last name and see how it goes. Because I was not getting any callbacks with when I did Rochelle Nguyen. So then that's why I was like, I don't know what this is. Let me just try it.
Yeah.
So I tried it and then I got callbacks from every single center.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you're like, surprise, here's my passport. It's actually, now how did you say your own last name there though?
Nguyen.
Nguyen.
Yeah.
How do you say it now?
Well, I still say Nguyen. I grew up saying Nguyen. I know in Vietnamese is Nguyen, just like the one syllable. But when people say
Nguyen,
Nguyen,
that one syllable.
if they can't say it, it hurts my ears more than just saying Nguyen. I think Nguyen's just safe. It's easy. It's gentle.
I love
Nguyen.
that. It hurts my ears more if you say it wrong. I could completely imagine that's what it's like. 100%. No, it's interesting because I interviewed Chris Nguyen. Is that all right? Years ago. And he's English Vietnamese and he pronounced his own name Nguyen as well. And his dad never corrected him. And it wasn't until he came back to Vietnam that they were like, that's not how you say it. And he's like, what do you mean? This is how I say my name. You can go back and listen to the episode. And he's like, yeah, I didn't realize I'd been saying my own name incorrectly for years because my parents just never corrected me.
I mean, my parents, they introduce themselves as Nguyen too.
Really?
They don't say Nguyen unless they're in the context of Vietnamese people. Then they'll say Nguyen. But other than that, it's always been Nguyen, Hung Nguyen, Van Nguyen.
So they taught you how to say it basically?
Yeah, but everyone I know back in Vancouver, they will say Nguyen. Because I think in Vietnamese, there's like the name Nguyen, this all kind of sounds like Nguyen Nguyen. So it's just easier to differentiate your last name as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, in Vietnam, there's 10 last names.
And Nguyen as I'm now saying it, is about 60% of them or something like
Pretty
that.
much.
But so how were, apart from ILA and other schools racially profiling you, which is essentially what they're doing, how were you treated by Vietnamese people here, knowing that you're Canadian Vietnamese? And I know you speak Vietnamese, which is a massive help, right?
Well, I know at ILA, my TAs, like my teacher assistants, they would tell me, even if you speak Vietnamese or understand it, just pretend you don't, because parents would have a problem. Because the kids would be like, they'll go home and tell the parents like so excitedly, but the parents are paying for an English speaker. They're worried that they're gonna be switching to Vietnamese. So I understand that from a parent perspective, they just want the best and they can't control what's happening in the classroom. So it's fair. But I mean, I did sneak in some Vietnamese to the younger kids because it's just easier. Like when you're teaching 3, 4-year-olds and you're asking them if they need to go toilet, it's just easier. But I did one time, a 5-year-old, she told me in Vietnamese that she pooped herself. I pretended I didn't understand Vietnamese.
I thought you were going to say it was handy that you knew Vietnamese at that point. Like the TA, like, something's wrong with her. I don't know
The
what
bell
it is.
was ringing in 3 minutes. And you know how at the end of the class in ILA, the TA kind of disappears to do
Yep.
like hand up the homework?
Yeah.
It was happening in that time. So in my head, I'm like, do I want this to be my problem for the next 3 minutes? Or I'm just going to pretend I don't understand?
So somebody told me the opposite. So they could speak Vietnamese, but they chose not to speak it in class because they didn't want the kids to know that they could understand them. And they didn't want the kids to talk to them in Vietnamese because they were like, if I let them know I can speak Vietnamese, the kids are just going to talk to me. And she said, it's really funny because I can understand. And again, it was really young kids, like 3, 4 years old. She's like, they're really mean to each other. Is that right?
Yeah. They're mean. Sometimes they say shit and you're like, wow, where did this come from? Or I had a little girl, she's like, she came in all sad. We're like, what's wrong, honey? Then she turns to her friend and be like, my daddy left me last night. He left me and my mom. I'm like, hey, what?
Oh shit, that's deep.
I know. A 4-year-old.
Yeah, so I mean, I think when I was an English teacher, obviously with the older kids, it's different. You can talk to them, but with the younger kids, it's, for me, ignorance was bliss.
Yeah.
For sure.
But did you like teaching teenagers or the young kids?
I like them both, to be honest. Like I'm quite good with kids. Like I've worked on a summer camp. I love working with children. And so I didn't think I would like working with the teenagers, but I actually quite liked it. And I quite the younger kids as well. I don't know. I liked it all, yeah.
Yeah.
But what was your biggest challenge then moving to Vietnam?
Biggest challenge, I mean, I came here quite a lot as a kid, so I think there was no culture shock. I was already used to the crazy roads, to the people staring, the pointing. So it's a little bit more natural for me. You just kind of learn to ignore. But in terms of the biggest challenge, I would say was trying to find friends because I wasn't Vietnamese enough to hang out with the fully Vietnamese people. But then because in Vancouver, I grew up predominantly around Asians, it was hard for me in the beginning to kind of find my foot as to where I belong. Because I wasn't Vietnamese enough to be Vietnamese, but I wasn't white enough to hang out with the white expats here. So it took a little bit while to just kind of explore and find the group of friends. I think that was the hardest for me.
And that's hard even for my wife and I as well, just trying to find, when you move away from home, it's a challenge to like find people. And the problem, have you had this as well? It's, as an expat here, it's such a transient population, right? And it's really, really difficult to make friends because a lot of the time they leave within a year. I mean, we've had friends that left without telling us.
Really?
Which is shocking, right? Yeah, they were like good friends with us, and one day they just messaged and they're like, oh yeah, we left. And it wasn't like something that we'd done because we'd other friends in the group.
Yeah.
They were like, do you know that they just left? And we're like, yeah, they just messaged us. They're like, they've gone. Like, wait, what? I thought we were all friends with them. So that's a bit extreme. But it's interesting you're saying that because I've just done an interview with Linda Beck, and she's Finnish, speaks Swedish, Vietnamese, English, comes here a lot, I think, as well. Yep. And the thing that she told me that really stood out was she was seen as Asian in the West, in home, and she's seen as white in Vietnam, and trying to marry those two things. That sounds similar to what you're saying
And
there.
I think with Linda, I think she looks even less Asian than I do. Like, I don't look Vietnamese. Linda looks even less Vietnamese, in my opinion. So I think we share that in the sense that people think that we're foreigners who learned how to speak Vietnamese versus actually like partially Vietnamese or full Vietnamese in my case. So it's just trying to find the right balance. But in Saigon, everyone's so open. So it's still quite easy, I find.
So did you learn Vietnamese all your growing up?
I knew grandma level Vietnamese. So whatever I could just speak to about my grandma, like, oh, how was your day? What did you eat?
Oh,
Are you
that's
feeling
nice.
okay? Yeah. How are your teeth doing?
Which is something you're never going to ask anyone else, right?
Yeah.
But then now are you quite fluent? It's improved?
I would say so. All of my staff that have known me for about like 4 or 5 years, they say my Vietnamese have improved. So
Nice.
that's a good thing. And then, but I would say that conversational Vietnamese, in terms of if we're able to like sit down and have a girls' night in Vietnamese, I wouldn't be able to do anything because I
Right.
can't get to that level of deep in Vietnamese. I know contracts. I can read housing contracts. I know construction terms to the point. I can talk about electricity in Vietnamese, but I can't talk about feelings in Vietnamese.
So tell me how you ended up managing two of the best cocktail bars in Saigon.
Thank you. Um, like how it started.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned earlier, you've decided, well, Jason suggested it to you. I loved as well, you mentioned, I'm going to do my master's or I'm going to open a cocktail bar. Like, those are two wildly different things. One is super risky and I would imagine expensive. The other is probably also more expensive, maybe, and not as risky. What your master's was going to be in marketing, I
I mean,
presume?
in master's, I was gonna do my bachelor's and I don't know, master's in MBA. So the bachelor's administration, like business
Business
administration.
administration, yeah.
Yeah, but even my professor in school told me not to do it because I emailed him saying, "Hey, I need your opinion. I like you. You gave me the best advice, so tell me what to do, please." And then he told me, "Don't do your master's. Wait a couple years." And he's like, "If you have the money, open up the bar, and if it doesn't work out in a year, then close it down. Don't put yourself in a hole. Close it down and take it as a learning lesson."
To reframe my question, how are your bars both so well thought of and so good, which they obviously are?
I think with the original 86 proof, like version 1 when it was still a 20-seater, our old bar manager, Hugh, I think he was the one who really defined the heart and soul of 86, where it was just purely neighborhood friendly. And he was a friendly face that everyone loved. And the neighborhood, like the neighbors, all of our people who live in Taodin truly got to know him. And I think we built that honestly around his heart and soul. And I think that's the whole idea that we carry on now is the fact that 86, I always call it like your neighborhood cocktail bar or your neighborhood pub, more like, with a lot of whiskeys and cocktails. So that's how I would normally describe, because as you say, like when we sit on the patio, you walk by so many people that like if you sit here for 2 hours, you're gonna like 10 people are gonna walk past and say hi.
And probably walk in as well.
Yeah.
Like you can't come here without meeting somebody that you know.
So I think as long as Jason and I keep the customers at the forefront, then it'll keep on being the core.
And the same question that I asked Jason is, what makes your whiskey sours so good?
I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, people always ask that. And to me, it's a whiskey sour. It's the recipes online. You know what the clear base is. Maker's Mark is just a good base for a whiskey sour. But I think it's just everyone, I don't know what it is that people love about it. I do know that we do go heavier on the bitters compared to most places. I actually don't know.
Well, he was pretty similar answer as well. So I haven't really mentioned it because I don't want to conflate the two of you, but you are partners with Jason Pham, who's been on an episode recently, and you're not just partners in life, partners in business as well. And so we asked him the same question, and it was a similar answer, which was so disappointing. So the other night, I was really lucky. Adrian and I were with James Jalokia, who's also been on the podcast as well, and owns Brick and Barrel and have a cocktail bar in there. And he was like, I want you guys to come over and try some cocktails. Of course, we said yes. He's like, I want you to see, we're gonna test the menu out. And I've never done anything like that before, and it was really interesting. We actually tried 3 whiskey sours, and the difference was how many mils of sugar they were adding. And the first one they made, I'd never really thought about it because I was just drinking. You're like, yeah, it tastes good. But I was like, oh no, actually, when you think about it, it's too sweet. No, sorry, it wasn't sweet enough. It was too like tart. Then we tried another one, and this one was too sweet. And then we tried the third one, and it was just right. How many mils of sugar do you put in your whiskey sours?
30.
No.
Yeah.
They must have something different with the balance. We ended up settling on 15, I think, if I remember correctly.
But I remember when we first opened up 86 proof, the whiskey sour that we landed on was the 34th whiskey sour that we tested.
So see, you're saying we don't know why the whiskey sour is so good. It took you 34 iterations to get to the right
Because
one.
we just tested every single bourbon, all the ryes, and we just did blind testings. And that was a pain because we did that in one day.
Oh, what a nightmare drinking 34 whiskeys.
See, that's why I don't drink anymore.
Yeah, that will do it for you. I mean, we tried 3 and that was enough. But there is something amazing. It's well done on what you've done here. These places are amazing. Was it a big leap to go from the 20-seater to this is 120?
Because then we had that little transition, like V1, version 1, version 2, version 3. So version 1 was a 20-seater. Then we took down the store to the left, and that opened up to be about 40 to 60,
I
remember?
forgot about that. Yeah,
During COVID.
That's right. Yeah,
That was
it was
during
really
COVID.
small. Then it got a lot bigger.
And then our landlord kicked us out, so we moved over here. But that's why we have this great-ass 2-story now. So that's good.
Nice. And so what's the future then for Mammy and 86 Proof Cocktails? Do we have a third one coming soon? You're going to dominate one twee and be another one soon?
I don't think we're going to be opening up any bars soon, but we are heading in the direction of consultancy projects. Yeah, a little bit more fun because you can just tell people what to do.
No, I do some audits for podcasts and I give people my advice on how to make the podcast better, but I'm always like, do what I say, not what I do, because I don't even know if I do all of this stuff that I'm telling you. I just know it's good advice, so that's really important. And do you think you'll be in Vietnam for the long term?
I think so. Yeah. I think
hate that
everyone here
question.
hits the, once you hit the 2-year mark, then it's a 7-year mark. That's what
Right.
I've noticed. Everyone either leaves at the 2nd year or 7th year.
Yeah, so you're 7.5, we're coming up, we're 8.5. So many people we know now, it's crazy. Like everyone we seem to meet, like how long have you been here? They're like 8 years, 7 years. Like it's weird that it's just, yeah. I think if it gets into you, right? What is it about Vietnam that keeps you here? What do you like about it the most?
I love the vibrancy and almost how chaotic it is, but you still get the best of both worlds. So that's why I said you get the Western comforts living in Tao Dien, but you can still go and sit on the street and do anything. And regardless of where you are in Saigon, you can always find something to do. Depending on your mood, you just go look online, you find a different event, different group of people, different vibe. It's just always alive. It's just a big city. That's why I think I love it. Whereas Vancouver is much more calm, chill, relaxing, Lululemon. Yeah.
Lululemon. I love it. That's a great note to finish. Saigon is not Lululemon. Thank you so much for coming on, Rochelle. I'm so glad we finally managed to do this. Was it as bad as you thought?
I heard my own voice. I like it now.
Yeah, you're not going to want to take these headphones off.
Yeah.
Wait till you take them off. It's a weird feeling.
Damn.
Are you ready? And if you like this podcast, please make sure to share it with somebody else. Rate, review, subscribe. Do everything to help this podcast keep growing as well. And if you want to join our community, go to patreon.com/a Vietnam podcast and you can become a Bop Sao Dare and maybe joining me here at 86 Proof. Do you like that name?
It's good.
Cheers.